So there's not a lot of great resources for male victims of abuse. There are some resources, and they go in a very red pill direction often. Mainstream resources tend to be oriented to women. And so this is an area where if a man is reading those resources, he has to read himself into the resources. But it can be triggering, to always read the man as the perpetrator and the woman is the victim. Um, or you have spaces that are allegedly for male victims of abuse, but it's really a bunch of abusive men who've come together to convince themselves that they're victims. What a hot mess if you're a man looking for information and resources as a victim. Which is why I do a lot of whenever you see like adapted on a resource I post in the subreddit, it's because I've usually adapted it for gender. One, because a lot of the things, even taking out the or male perpetrator, female victim kind of norm, it's also heteronormative. So it makes it hard for people that are queer to read these resources that also apply to them. Um, so that's why I like to do the gender neutral if I can. Although sometimes the they gets confusing and I can't. But to the ability that I think it makes sense, I always try to do that. So one of the misconceptions about male victims of abuse, I think, is that they never existed and that this is a new thing. That patriarchy meant that there were no male victims of abuse. Because how could there be? Because men were the ones in charge of this like hierarchical structure. And what's really interesting is when you start to look at history, you see with the present day concepts that we've articulated, you can look at it and go, oh, okay, this is the dynamic that was happening. So, I remember reading resources and seeing something like a henpecked man, and there'd be like funny cartoons, and the man would be being chased by this like larger wife with a frying pan. And I went, oh, that that seems like that was the iteration of the abuse dynamic with men as a victim, like in a historical perspective. Um, I was also reading Little House on the Prairie, actually, the Little House books, because they go through the long winter. It's like this blizzard of, I don't know, 1888, 1881. There was like a series of blizzards that they were bad. And I had like remembered them and I was like, let me go reread these books and just like see if there's any good information there. And so I'm rereading the books. And by the way, I'm not recommending it because looking with the eyes of 2026, there is racist. There's don't do it. Just don't read it. Just let it lie. But there was a situation that was referenced in these happy golden years. So I'm reading the book, and Laura is 15, and she gets a post at a school as a teacher. And in order to teach at that school, she has to stay with the shanty claim shack of the school board president, which is really just like the lead guy of these four families in this little section of the prairie. And so she's there and she's describing the wife and the dynamic between the wife and the husband. And I'm looking at it from the eyes of 2026 like, oh my gosh, this man is being abused. Um, and so it's written in the book from a perspective of like this woman is sullen and she yells at the guy a lot and whatever. But then it's like one night Laura wakes up and she's got a knife and she's standing over the bed and she's yelling at the husband that he kicked her and he said, I didn't kick you, but you need to put down the butcher knife. It's not okay. Like now to be fair, this woman is trapped on a prairie in the middle of nowhere. Maybe she went crazy and the trauma and the whatever, but she got to a point where she was being like unsafe. So like we understand how she got there, but it's also not okay to be abusive or to threaten the other person with a butcher knife. Like, don't do it. So anyway, this idea that that male victims of abuse is like a recent thing, in my opinion, is like not historically sound. When I've seen male victims of abuse, a lot of the time it's that maybe they don't have an assertive personality. A lot of like very strong guys have been heavily socialized to not hurt other people. Usually when you're big, you got that big early on. So you're gonna have like a bunch of people telling you, like, you be careful with other people, da 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 da. And so they it's like the big dog, small dog thing, you know. No one no one shuts down the small dog's aggression because, oh, it's cute, or, you know, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But like the big dog's aggression, you know, you're like, oh no, we're not. This is gonna be dangerous. But what ends up happening is that like the little dog can also do damage, especially when we're talking about human beings who have knives, guns, whatever. Everybody's got to sleep at some point. So if you've been conditioned to never do anything, even if it's for your own protection, then you're more vulnerable. You're also more vulnerable if you don't see the other person as an abuser. Like, you know, a lot of men in their minds, they're strong and they can't be abused. Like, it's not even a possibility on the spectrum of possibilities. And so they tolerate or can tolerate some behaviors that, if it were reversed, would be absolutely clear to everybody. Like, this is an abusive situation. And it is not okay for someone to talk to you this way, treat you this way, hit you. It doesn't matter if the hitting actually is harming. Hitting, period, is abusive. So even if she's or he is just slapping the male victim of abuse, that's still abuse. It does not have to harm you to be harmful. And so, you know, you get these guys that have been conditioned not to like do anything. And also the perpetrator who has been allowed to be as aggressive as they want to be, or who just may in general have like a more dominating personality, which is why I like the model that talks about like power, like who has power in a relationship. But there are different types of power. You know, there's financial power, there's psychological power, there's physical power, there's intellectual power. And so you can have these strengths, let's say, and not misuse them to the other person. But you can't, I think it takes a more nuanced approach to really look at a situation and see who has power and who doesn't. Because if having power, if you're afraid to use it, doesn't mean you have power then. And also, you know, I find the victims of abuse are often extremely ethical people. They're trying to be morally ethical people. And so if you're afraid that by exerting your power, you're gonna hurt another person and you're gonna be the abuser, well then I think a lot of victims make the choice, well, I'd rather be the one to be abused because I don't want to be the abuser. That's not the person that I want to be. And so it's extremely hard because we don't have a lot of good examples of power, because people that are using power in a good way, it's almost invisible. It just looks like, oh, this is how things are supposed to go. And so we're not really paying attention to, oh, this person has power in this situation and they're using it to empower other people, but also to create a situation and an environment of safety. And so they tend to use soft power before they start leveraging hard power. And so we do have examples of power being used appropriately, and responsibly, but we're not really, in my opinion, good at identifying that. I was actually watching an episode of The Rookie. It was a pilot episode, and there was a big guy who was being abused by his wife. So he's like a wrestler. She's tiny. but she's the one who's psychologically dominating, and he's got a go along to get along kind of personality. And so the go along to get along personality can be hijacked in an abuse dynamic. It's great in healthy dynamics. That definitely allows people to be themselves. Um, but if that's the type of personality you have, then you can be vulnerable in a way that you don't recognize that you're vulnerable. I also, um, I know victims of abuse, male victims of abuse, who had been in trouble, in need, needing help, and a friend or someone they knew would offer help. And so they'd go, oh, okay, great, thank you. And then it was like, well, now I've helped you. Now I have these expectations. And if they'd known about the expectations, they wouldn't have like made the choice. But even, some people are in that situation where they go, well, I have to exchange this for that, and I don't want to be unsafe. So I'll make that shitty choice for my own safety. And women, female victims of abuse have often made that choice. But I had a friend who he needed a place to live. He was in another country, and a friend took him in, and then suddenly she started being, well, now I've taken you in, so now I feel entitled. And she started like trying to force him into being her partner, and he had never been interested in her like that. And so watching that dynamic unfold was really hard. Because the question isn't who you think somebody is, it's what choices do they make when they feel entitled, when they have the ability to make whatever they think should happen. A lot of abusers aren't sitting there thinking that they're abusers. There is the Machiavellian, like intentional, like kind of psychopathic abuser. But there's a lot of people that are just selfish, and they want what they want. And once they have the opportunity to get it, they take it, because why wouldn't you? It's stupid if you don't. So anyway, if you're a male victim of abuse, if you're bigger and you're afraid to try and protect yourself because you know that you would do so much more damage if you did, I would personally recommend containment, and then also getting out of the situation. But containment. When I had the situation with my mom, I was 16. I had just been kicked out of foster care. She was not a stable person. Like growing up with my dad was actually better. And she attacked me in a bathroom. And of course, at this point, I'm taller than her. I'm bigger than her. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, what do I do? Because I don't want to get in trouble. I know she'd call the cops. I don't want to hit her anyway. Like I wasn't going to let her sit there and hit me either. And so what I ended up doing was very, very gingerly. I pinned her to the wall, and I just was very calm. And I said, Mom, you can't hit me. It's not okay to hit me. Just like, I need you to calm down. And then I would just kind of like say the things on repeat until she calmed down. And then she never did it again. But I mean, I really was like, I'm in trouble. And actually, she did end up calling the police on me at some point later for not waking her up for a phone call. And I took a message instead. Anyway, again, not a stable person. So, if you're in that situation and you're like, what do I do? One, recognize that someone's saying hurtful things, even if it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't mean that they're not being abusive. And there comes a point where, like water on a rock, it'll carve something out in you. So just because you don't feel like you've been harmed doesn't make it not harmful. And the same thing for physical assault. Just because someone's hitting you and it doesn't hurt doesn't make it not harmful and not abusive. And so if you are being hit by a person, it's not okay. That's still abusive, whether or not you feel that it's hurting you. And finally, I just want to say that everyone wants to be in a relationship where they are being respected. And so if someone is speaking to you in these ways, or if someone is putting their hands on you, even if you don't feel like that is being like an actual harm toward you, that's still not okay. They're not treating you with respect. They're not treating you as someone who is a human being deserving of autonomy and care and consideration. So if you're a man and you're in this dynamic, you can be abused, even if you don't recognize it, even if they're smaller, even if it doesn't hurt. It doesn't make it not abuse, and those impacts do add up. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.